Hello everyone and welcome back to another edition of Talking Points with KPI, episode number 31. Today is another blog style podcast, but is more specific to a certain athlete that we have in the building. And obviously, as you can see our screen, that big face on the screen, that is Gabe Gaeckle. Today we'll be going over his journey through not only his baseball career, but our career in KPI. So Eric, I'll let you start and give a broad spectrum.
The reason why we kind of chose to showcase Gabe for this particular one is, one, we're trying to highlight our high school guys during high school season. But then two, Gabe was a really unique case. We have a ton of high-level pitchers in there here. We know that. Most of them have been here for a long time. They showed up at a young age, and we've developed them. Gabe got to us later in his high school journey, and he had a serious injury that we'll talk about. So he presented from a lot of different perspectives that we'll look at today much differently. So it was a cool story, especially with how well he's doing, for us to kind of highlight, because it really is a prime example of our approach to things.
So Dan, coming into a facility, obviously you worked with guys who have major injuries before. What was your first, I'll just get into it, what was your first impression of the young man, Gabe?
And I definitely don't want to skip over the fact that this is not something new to us.
Yes.
Like designing programs for athletes to reach their full potential, whether they're currently injured or currently uninjured, it's the same process. It just takes probably a higher level of attention to detail for this athletes that fall into this bucket specifically, because there's a little bit more on the line, right? I'm already committed. I already played at a very, very high level. I am returning from an injury that, yes, is serious, but it's like fortunate and unfortunate. Like it's turning into kind of a mainstay for guys who throw really, really hard. Like you look at the minor league and the professional level, almost every pitcher has had Tommy John at some point in their life. And it's just a function of the hardest throwers get used the most. And if they throw hard really at a young age and you have a dad who's running your team, like that's not necessarily Gabe's story, but we have had a lot of athletes that come through and have done our return to throwing, return to competing protocols, and we've really expanded on that. And then I think that we've started to earn the credibility and respect from other professionals, whether they're orthopedics, physical therapists, chiropractors. People are referring their patients to us because we have proven to do this really, really well. So I don't think there was anything out of the norm with Gabe when he first came in. It was just more, hey, this is a high-level arm. We already have experience managing and dealing with high-level arms. But I think the uniqueness for me was the buy-in piece. There was a massive amount of buy-in that had to happen with the athlete themselves, and then even secondary to that with the families themselves. Eric dealt with most of the family component, but I think with the initial assessment process, and if I'm getting ahead of us, let me know. There was we need to go in depth. We need to prove our worth. We need to say, here are the things that we can truly fix for you right now.
Yeah.
And then here's how we can lay out the plan, not just to say, oh, you're healthy, go play. That we're going to continually be a part of your journey.
Well, let's talk about how he got here, basically, and then we'll kind of hop right into the assessment. He's a good player growing up, and then his story with COVID and the surgery made the 2 years right before he got here super unique.
Yes.
Goes out to high school baseball as a freshman. He was talented. There's no way around it. Only pitched a few innings, then COVID hit. So high school season gets shut down. The world gets shut down. Comes right out of COVID in the summer and hooks on with his travel team right away and blows his elbow out right away. So from there, successful surgery. He was really on his own to rehab because PT clinics were still shut down for a long time in COVID. So he rehabbed by himself during COVID, which is pretty incredible. So a 15-year-old kid not going to school, gets a major surgery, baseball's taken away, school's taken away, friends taken away. He's rehabbing now all by himself. And he obviously did a great job because he came out last summer and did really well, got a lot of college attention, pitched well at the area codes. And then right as he was getting to us in October, he had pretty much gotten cleared from his ortho. It was over a year out. He was looking for something like, hey, I want to improve myself and I don't want to get hurt again. Those were his goals. And he had just committed UCLA when he got to us. So, we got a really good product. But like Dan said, I think on his end, Gabe was a very captive audience because he knew he had some talent and he knew he was pretty good, but he wanted to go further with it and tackle the health piece. I think with him, the health piece had never been tackled. Like, why did he get hurt?
Yeah.
At such a young age, and obviously one of the reasons is because he throws so hard. But I think now we'll kind of dive into Dan's assessment of him.
Yeah.
We did definitely see some things that were a little outliers, especially for hard throwers for us that are at a young age.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think from the physical assessment standpoint, joint by joint, we got to break down and get as much information as we can, and then know what is first and foremost how you were born, like that's just who you are. What is changes due to being a baseball player? What are changes due to, and this is more unique to Gabe, like at this point, he was working out. He was a big, strong kid. He wouldn't throw as hard if he didn't. There are changes that can happen due to the exercise you choose in the weight room that can either help or hinder your ability to perform. And you leave a 13, 14, 15-year-old to, they can just work out at the home gym, which at that time he had no choice. They're going to bench, they're going to squat, and they're going to deadlift. Yeah. And they're going to go as heavy as they possibly can. And for certain players, they need to do that. For this particular athlete, he didn't need to. And it was probably at a detriment to a certain extent, which we saw with a lot of our range of motion testing. So, working from the ground up, poor ankle mobility, huge for our pitchers as far as being able to load their back hip, maintaining their direction down the mound, putting force into the ground so that we can transfer that force up the chain. Poor, when we say active internal rotation, like you can have a range of motion, but if you don't have control over it, meaning active control, like then it pretty much could be at a detriment, especially when we're working on a mound. Momentum is something really hard to control when you're young.
Yeah.
And so that strength training piece that he had already done put him in a position again to throw really, really hard. Mm-hmm. But when we start limiting range of motions at each joint, we're going to then go up the chain or down the chain to try and find that. Poor shoulder mobility. This is a big one for just bench, overhead pressing. Just trying to get big, right? There's a component there that yes, for most kids they need to get better push-ups, and bench press isn't the worst choice for majority of athletes. But I had a tweet earlier this week like, how much is enough? Yeah. And then it cannot take away from the most important thing, which is being a baseball player. And then thoracic spine mobility. And I think the poor shoulder mobility, thoracic spine mobility, we had to figure out, is this from his training that he was doing on his own? Is this from throwing, because he throws really, really hard? Is this also a result of the body reacting to the injury component? Because no matter what, your body is going to react to pain and then try and limit the opportunity for pain. And then what do we need to change? And then what do we need to leave? Because another part of this unique to this is when we have a high performer, we can't screw them up. We can't make them worse. And it's, you have bad spine mobility. If you make more spine mobility, you'll throw harder. And it's like, well, it's not that simple. Yeah. And so, I think taking that information, and then luckily for Gabe, at this point in time, we were all in on using our force plates and the Hawkins Dynamics force plates and getting that information. So looking at, here's how you're built. And then we understand how you move. We understand your pitching mechanics. And we'll probably go into this is like pitching mechanics before and after the injury. And then we need to understand how you're wired. So the central nervous system tells the body how to function. And everybody has kind of a genetic disposition in a certain way. We use the analogy of a car. Some kids are F-150s. Some kids are Corvettes. Most kids are Honda Civics. I would say, Gabe was a Corvette with the potential to be a Ferrari, or already a Ferrari, but there were some things obviously that led to increasing the chances of him getting injured. So using that information too was huge. Because again, majority of the athletes that come into our building don't perform at his level, and then usually are like what I call Gumbies. They have plenty of range of motion. That's not the problem. They just have no control over it. Mm-hmm. He had a ton of power output, but he didn't have enough range of motion to then disperse that force over the course of his whole body. So then, as our baseball players, it's going to go to your back, your shoulder, or your elbow. Yeah.
So now getting through the assessment now becomes kind of a mental game, not only for Gabe, but for us as KPI. Like, is he going to buy in? Is he going to actually like what we do? Talk about that next step and how, Dan touched on it a little bit in saying how Gabe mentally was just, I'm all in. I know that you guys are going to be able to do this for me. Talk about how you saw that transition happen.
It has been interesting and even slightly challenging. There was some apprehension with him. Like, right, we have this kid that throws really hard and has a bright future in the game. He's already been hurt. We don't want to hurt him again. And that's always our first premise is to do no harm. So we wanted to make sure that we were handling him the right way. And also, too, them being over the hill, and Aptos, like, they didn't know us, there wasn't built-up relationships and stuff like that. So I think there was some apprehension on their end. I think they were being advised from people over there that didn't know us either, and so they were kind of a little nervous about our style of training. And I think I was told by some people, well, you have to do your training no matter what, and we slow played it with Gabe because I felt like we could earn their trust,
Sure.
and that's what happened. So he wasn't throwing when he started with us. We had shut him down for the fall. So we had a little bit of a blank slate, and he was able to just focus on the strength routine and arm care as we started to ramp up, and he didn't have to worry a ton about throwing hard. And so, he drove over here 3 or 4 times a week, did the workouts, did the stuff on his own. He communicates a lot, which is really helpful. But we were able to kind of just ease him into this style of training, and he took to it right away on the strength side of things.
Yeah.
I think, and that again, speaking to our force plate technology, like we then validated to see the changes. Like even the physical assessment, and we're working on this, is somewhat subjective because I'm still the person who's doing the assessment. We keep it consistent because of the way the tests are done, and it's really right now only me doing assessments. So that gives a level of confidence in, okay, if the tester stays the same, we see an improvement in spine range of motion or hip range of motion, okay, we saw an improvement.
The consistency will stay.
Correct. Yes. We're working on making that more objective with some more new pieces of tech we got in the building, but from a force plate standpoint, that gave us, okay, if we improve his range of motion, if we have this massive engine that can give a massive force output, but because his range of motion is so restricted, it's going to not make it all the way up the kinetic chain. We were then able to see, okay, in the weight room on a foundational standpoint, we can express force over a larger time. That's the biggest issue for him. And then that was, okay, we've got this good foundation. We've got the range of motion we need back. We've prepared the body and the tissues for the active throwing. And then I think that helped with that buy-in piece. Okay, the strength is working. The arm care is working. My arm feels better. Okay, what's the next thing that we can hey, like, let's take this to the next level.
So then he started. He was able to hop in on our normal high-level pitcher schedule and start the on-ramp November 1st with the other boys. So it worked out okay, that whole setup. It wasn't necessarily on purpose, just when he showed up was kind of when those things happened. And then so he was on the honor, but I'd seen him throw in a game once.
Wow.
So there wasn't a whole lot of basic knowledge of his throwing mechanics. And I certainly, when I did see him, I wasn't in a position to evaluate him. It was more so he threw one inning and he was out of there. He was still rehabbing. So, as we started to get into bullpens in December, we were all very curious on how he was going to present. So probably a good time to jump in here. But, we use our biomechanics app a lot in here. Gabe was a guy that we used it on. I apologize we don't have this singled out. I only have the overlay right now. But if you kind of pay attention to the red guy here as we go through, we see a few things. One, very, very good with his lower half. He stays connected pretty well. He gets down the mound pretty well. He decelerates very well. But if we pay attention to this, really what jumped out right away with him was 2 big things. Lower half's working great. Again, just paying attention to the red. We see this, and Dan will comment on the stress it puts on the arm, but we see this crazy arm path with the red one here. So he gets back in the scap load. He starts hiking his elbow up. His shoulder gets back. It comes back down, around, and then through. So there's this huge stretch shortening cycle taking place in his arm path that was very, very inefficient. And he was also, because of all that extra movement, he was getting his hand up late at foot strike, which that forearm flare we know is a precursor to elbow injuries. So Dan, talk about a little bit about stretch shortening cycle and kind of what was going on physically with him.
I think what happens over the course of a season is you're going to lose ranges of motion and you're going to gain ranges of motion. Lower half-wise, we're going to lose back hip internal rotation. It's no different in the shoulder. We're going to lose our throwing shoulder internal rotation over the course of the season because we're always hammering into external rotation, just like our back hip. That loading phase of our back hip gives us enough time to get our arm up on time. And so I think that was probably where, as his lower half was being used more, we're not maintaining the range of motion, we're just getting big in the weight room, we're giving ourselves less time to get our arm up into the optimal positions. And so I think that was one of the big ones. I think secondary to that was our spine, our thoracic spine specifically, is also going to help us get our arm into an optimal position. We need thoracic extension and we need rotation to get our arm into our arm slot. And if we can't get it from that joint, we are going to go either downstream to our lower back or upstream. And so for him, he would go upstream. I have this really loose, hypermobile shoulder. I can throw extremely hard with it, and I'm going to manipulate that. And that's what we were seeing with the initial mechanical screen.
So what we do here with the pitchers is once we do this, once we get, and a lot of guys have to wait. Like Gabe had to wait before he got this because he wasn't high intent throwing. There's no real point to get in mechanical view unless they're throwing hard. So once we got this, we're able to program him with individualized drills. So all of our pitchers get a personal assessment like this, and then we put on their programs some individualized drills to address their particular mechanical issues. It doesn't make sense for everyone to come in here and do rocker drill, or everyone come in here and do connection ball in the upper arm, because they all present differently. So what we gave him was 2 different drill series that he would alternate. We've kind of morphed it into one thing now that he's in season, but what we did with him was some simple connection ball work up top. So in his upper arm, to kind of get him to feel, give him a constraint to feel at 90 degrees. But I think the more important thing that he does now, and the thing that might freak some people out, is he throws clubs. So we have our Oath Specialties clubs. They're red throwing clubs. And really what they do with the length and the weight at the end, and the club in the hand like this. And you'll see, I'll show you in a sec here one of his drills, but we took him through drill series, and then he throws it, and it forces him into a proper elbow forearm position, and it forces him to go straight forward with his arm. He's not going to have the ability to do all kinds of the crazy stuff back here like he was, because the club wasn't going to allow him to do it. It truly was the perfect constraint for him.
Yes.
So here's kind of a picture of him doing it, and you can see the direct path and much less movement as he does this drill. So he's just starting him in that 90-degree position so he can feel it, and then he kind of just comes straight forward from there. So you see him inside 90, and then you see this is really, you can see with the green line, just super direct arm path now with the club.
Yes.
Most of the time, this takes kids months. Like Gabe, you'll see in the next one, we'll go back to that overlay. Gabe was like that. In 3-4 weeks, he got this down. So going back now, after a few weeks of the drill routine, continuing to do the strength and mobility training, and we really had to hammer him. He's a kid that likes to work out every day, so we had to tell him, like, hey, when you're at home, when you're not here, double up on your mobility work. And the force plates was showing that too. He's a high tension athlete, and we started to see that come down too as his throwing ramped up. So going back to the overlay now, you'll see on here. Now let's pay attention to the blue guy. Okay, so same overlay. This is about a month after the first one. We see in the blue, he actually starts behind the red, but then we see this really direct path now, and he actually wins the race, even though it started way past it. Okay, and the reason why the blue guy won the race is because of that nice direct arm path he was now sporting with the club. Yes. So that's kind of what happened through his throwing programming. It wasn't that simple. Like, this is constant monitoring and engagement and stuff like that. He even now has a set of clubs that he uses before his high school games now and stuff to kind of do that. So,
I think if we go back to the club concept, one of the things that we've had a lot of success with guys who are coming off of any level of injury, whether it's my elbow's a little sore, my shoulder's a little sore, to the extreme of, okay, I have a surgically repaired joint. If we're going to change mechanics or change movements, I like the idea and the concept of movements better than mechanics. Because the belief with mechanics is like, okay, well, if I tweak this one little thing, like a car, then all of a sudden it's going to be this perfect mechanic. And it's the human body doesn't work that way. Mm-hmm. We need to improve movement and movement efficiency. And if we're going to change movement, we have to change the task. We have to change the environment. And then we've been talking about this whole time, we have to change the organism. So we'd already set this awesome stage and foundation of, okay, Gabe's body is in a better position to do what it needs to do. But beyond that, if we're going to change his throwing movements, his throwing mechanics, we can't just grab a baseball and start throwing it again. Because it's been in his brain, like, ingrained 2 things. When I throw a baseball, my body's going to want to do what I've done for my entire life, number 1. Number 2, throwing a baseball hurts. My brain has associated a baseball with pain. And so one of the biggest things to overcome any type of arm injury is the confidence piece of, like, I'm healthy, I can come back to it. And so throwing clubs, throwing other implements, throwing other things are going to help improve that. And I think that was a really big thing that we have implemented heavily with all of our athletes is we need to get you out of the fight or flight mode. Yes. We need to get you into the I'm comfortable and confident to throw mode. And then we need to then progress into, as game-like as possible. And I think that, Gabe is a great example of that.
Absolutely. That's a perfect example of the constraints-led approach too. Yes. Like if Gabe, like you could see on the red overlay there, like that's not an efficient arm path. That's pretty obvious, right? Like yes. You don't need to know a ton about pitching to see that. But if he was taking a lesson from some pitching coach, the pitching coach, hey, stop doing that with your arm. Like, it would have never worked, like it wasn't feasible for that movement pattern to be fixed by someone telling him what to do. It needed to be a constraint that he was under. And that's why this works so well with him, because we found really the perfect constraint for him.
Yeah. And I think that's even going to the rehab prehab component, like the normal, and we were talking about this last night, like the normal rehab for an athlete coming back off of an arm injury is the return to throwing interval throwing program. And the problem with that is the belief is, okay, we just increase the number of throws, volume, we increase the distance, which just assumes intensity. The further the distance, the harder I throw, which that's not true. And then over time, then we progress from playing catch to flat grounds to the mount. Within that time frame, there is a massive opportunity to basically remap the brain and rewire it, and just mindlessly going through stage 1, stage 2, stage 3 of your throwing program, that might not put you in the best position for success. Because like we were talking about last night, like what if you need to stay in stage 8 longer, or you're ready to progress to the next one? This is boring, I don't want to do this anymore. We need to increase the objectivity of how we return players to throwing, and then as we'll probably get into this, like how we return them to pitching. I think that's the other part that gets lost on us. Like, oh, you're cleared to throw, go compete. Or you're healthy, and it's like, oh, it's this many months since your surgery, you're clear. It's like we know that that's not true. Like we know it's more complicated than that.
That's a good segue into basically where we're at right now with him. So, he had a very normal winter with us, right? He was able to hop in, start the on-ramp on time, go through live ABs, no hiccups. But he was different come spring. In the previous 2 years, so freshman, sophomore year in high school, I think I counted he had thrown 15 innings between those 2 years. So high school, COVID hit, come out, get surgery, rehab last summer. It was very, very little innings pitched in the last 2 years. The worst possible thing for him at that point in time would have been ready, set, go play high school baseball. One of the largest precursors for injuries is too many innings the next year. There's too much of a multiplier. 1 year to the next with innings for pitchers. So especially if someone who throws as hard as Gabe. So he had the great winter. He PR'd, I think 96.9. He PR'd during the winter. But and I talked to his family about this. Like, our largest concern needs to now be how many innings he pitches and how he pitches those innings, the progression he pitches those innings. So, we made him a very strict progression on his pitching uptick over the course of the season. So he's sticking to it. It's not very much fun for him sometimes because he feels good. He's barely getting sore after his outings. He feels great. He's throwing the crap out of the ball. But, it's kind of a weekly conversation we have, like, here's the next step, and you're going to stick with this week. And it's working, so, and that's the main thing. And, even his high school coaches have been a little frustrated with it. But the point is, he's healthy, he's throwing the ball great, and this is working. And that's what's best for him. So, he's thrown 9 innings. He has a .78 ERA, and he struck out 22 guys in 9 innings. It's nuts, So, we're seeing high-level stuff. We're seeing high-level output. But most importantly, he's recovering. He might be the healthiest guy we have right now. He barely gets sore and wants to go the next day. So, opponent's batting average 147. So, he communicates a ton. Pretty much every day he's reaching out about how he's feeling, what to do, any adjustments that need to be made. So obviously, we're in best case scenario with him right now, and he will stay on this kind of strict progression throughout the spring and the summer to get him through the summer, and then we'll kind of reevaluate from there.
Yeah, I think overall, and if you want to cut me off, this is a great example of our systems approach.
Yes.
And we'll have some content out here soon about this. Like, you could have a return to throwing program, you could have a velocity program, you could have command program, you could have all these different programs. The problem with them is they're not going to evolve and meet the needs of that athlete on that day. It's just step 1 and then 2 and then 3 and you're cleared and you can play, and then it doesn't take into account of like, well, he's the best, arguably the best arm at his high school. They're going to ride him. Like we know that's going to be the case. Okay, how do we set him up for success to make sure that doesn't end up being at his detriment, right? I had this ultimate goal of playing at the highest level I can get to. Okay, yeah, that's the ultimate goal. We're going to design a system that's going to give you the feedback. Am I moving closer or moving further away? It's my biggest beef with a lot of the quote-unquote programs that are out there. It's just, return to throwing program. It's 8 weeks or 8 months or 2 months, and you get through it and you're good. And It's like, well, again, like, maybe that guy's ready. We see it with injuries all the time where guys are coming back from ACL tears in 6 months, and you're, oh no, it's going to take a year. Well, if you follow a system and you do things correctly, it can happen much faster.
And with us, the way we treat the pitchers in here, it's a 12-month system. Yes. It wasn't like February 1st as Gabe goes to his high school or other guys, and we slap him on the butt, say, hey, have a good spring. Yeah. Every pitcher's coming in here most Sundays, and they're not necessarily throwing bullpens or doing high-intent pitching, but they go through a check-in on their app. Our pitching coaches check in with them. With a guy like Gabe, we're going to have a lot more oversight too and check in with him a lot more, make sure he's doing well. So we don't lose connection to them. Like, we're at their games, we're checking their stats, we're checking in with them to make sure they're doing well. So this is a holistic approach by us. It's not just, oh, you're paying for training this month, we're going to talk to you then, and now we're not going to talk to you. It's really how we built this thing, and in a much different mold than other facilities where we're going to stay connected to them as much as possible at all times.
Yeah.
So we kind of, this was a couple weeks ago when he came in on a Sunday to throw a pen, but without getting too dorky on the mechanics, where we see just a much, much cleaner mechanical set than we saw that first bullpen. So really direct arm path. I think this is a little early, but he's pretty much getting to 90 degrees on his forearm. Nice posture, nice direction. And then obviously the results on the field and the way he's recovering is kind of speaking for itself. So, this is a kid that we he's starting to get a lot of attention. He didn't get that attention at a young age. He wasn't on the circuit because he was hurt. Perfect Game didn't know who he was. Baseball America didn't know who he was. And now he's kind of blown up a little bit. He's ranked on the top 100 draft prospects. Invited to all the major events now. So we're starting to see basically the blossoming of a pretty talented young man. And it's all because kid works his butt off and he buys in and he does his stuff. So.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'd say I want to speak back to, like, I think there's a tendency, again, facilities like us, you just focus on that guy. He's going to get drafted. That's all you care about. Yeah. It's like, no, like we really do want to help all athletes, and we stay in contact with as many athletes as possible. And really, the a testament to this, like we're open on Sundays to make sure that kids can get in here, and it sucks to work on the weekends. Nobody likes working on the weekends, but it is a testament to our pitching coaches and our staff as a whole. Like, we want to give you every opportunity to be here with us and get maintain this progression of moving forward and staying within our systems. Versus, again, like, we could, like, business wise, it'd be smarter for us to just shut down during the spring, because it's really hard to justify being open and paying all the expenses that go with this entire facility just for the handful of high school baseball players who come in here. But we keep our doors open. We make sure that every single athlete has an opportunity to communicate with us, whether it's in-house, in person, or remotely too. Like, it's not like, oh, well, you're not paying for training. If you text me, I'm never going to respond to you. It's like, no, we help as many kids as we possibly can. And again, I wanted to highlight that because I think there's a potential, like, oh, you just care about him because he's going to be a really good baseball, or he is a good baseball player, and no, like, we try and do that for every single athlete that comes in our doors.
And that's huge. And I definitely think, like, I don't know if you guys noticed, but the most underlining thing about this whole talk is you guys communicate with everybody knows what's going on, good or bad. Doesn't matter if the news is the best news in the world or it's horrible news. They will find out from you guys, because that's the unique truth that you guys always give out. And it's nice to see that we have athletes that are flourishing off their own truth and off their own hard work. So it's awesome to see. Shout out Gabe.
Yeah, and that's probably the best thing to finish on right there. We could do all of this, and Gabe could walk in these doors and be just like, oh, I'm just hanging out. Yeah, I'm good. I'll just, like, say yes to Eric when he's there, but if Eric's not watching me doing my drills, then I don't care. Or if Dan's there and he tells me to do my mobility twice a day, and I was like, oh yeah, I'll do that, Dan, and you go home and you keep playing video games all night. Yep. Like, this entire system does not work without the athlete doing everything, like working their butts off. Like, his progress and how much he's gotten out of this is truly a testament to his work ethic. And we knew that was not an issue when he came in our doors. We knew that the work ethic component was not an issue for Gabe. It was, okay, the system piece, the feedback is actually making me better, and that feedback loop that we really tried to implement with him. And I think, again, we are not where we're at without the athletes who are in our building working their butts off.
All of them.
Yes. And I want to make sure that that's very clear. Like, we are not very important. Again, Gabe, we could do this exact same thing for the next Gabe Gaeckle, and if they don't work hard and they don't push themselves and they don't live up to the work ethic that he brings to the table, then the system doesn't work. And so that's, I think, last little thing I'd like to say.
Yeah. All right. Thank you guys very much for listening to Talking Points with KPI, episode 31. Like we said earlier in the podcast, this is a blog-style podcast. If you would like to read more of Eric's blogs, go visit kpimh.com. Under the blog tab, they will all be in there. Just go look at all our social medias: YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. Thank you guys for listening. See you guys next time.